Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. You know how much we love digging into these big ideas that are shaping our world. And today we're going to be talking about how the internet is changing entertainment and retail.
Really changing things.
Yeah, absolutely. And our guide for this journey is Chris Anderson's book, The Long Tail.
Oh, a great one.
Yeah, have you read it?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, it's a good one. So Anderson's main argument is that technology, particularly the internet, is really shifting markets away from just focusing on those big mainstream hits, the blockbusters, the bestsellers, and towards a world where all these niche interests can actually flourish.
Yeah, and that's something we can all relate to, right? Because we all have our own unique interests, things we're passionate about that might not be, super mainstream.
Exactly. And it's like, online retailers can offer millions of products.
Yeah.
You can find almost anything you can imagine, but then you go to like your local bookstore,
Right.
and they might have, what, a few thousand titles at most?
Yeah, it's a great point. And actually, Anderson uses a really cool real-world example in the book that perfectly illustrates this shift. He talks about this book called Touching the Void and the unexpected success it had after John Krakauer's Into Thin Air became a bestseller.
Okay, so Into Thin Air is about that disastrous Everest expedition, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember that one. I actually read Touching the Void a
Mm-hmm.
while back. It's a pretty harrowing account of a climbing accident in the Andes, but I never realized those two books were connected like that. What's the story there?
Well, Touching the Void was originally published in 1988.
Oh, wow.
And while it had a decent run, it wasn't like a massive hit.
Yeah.
Fast forward to the late 90s, Into Thin Air hits the shelves and it becomes a global phenomenon. And then suddenly, almost a decade after its initial publication, Touching the Void experiences this huge surge in sales.
Wow, that's so interesting. What caused that resurgence? Was it just like a coincidence?
Not at all. Anderson actually points out that online booksellers, particularly Amazon, played a key role. They started recommending Touching the Void to people who bought Into Thin Air, and this seemingly forgotten book found a whole new audience.
So it's like the internet acted as this matchmaker connecting readers who were interested in one mountain climbing story to another one they might also enjoy.
Exactly.
I love that. That's such a perfect example of how technology can unearth these hidden gems that might have been completely missed by those traditional retailers.
Yeah.
But before we get too deep into that, I'm curious, why were those hidden gems so hard to find in the pre-internet era?
That's where Anderson's concept of the tyranny of locality comes in. He argues that the physical world, by its very nature, places limitations on what we can access and consume.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Like a bookstore or a movie theater only has so much physical space, they can't possibly stock everything.
Right. They have to be really selective about what they offer.
Exactly. So they have to be really picky about what they choose to carry. And I guess those choices are probably driven by, the need to reach a certain number of sales just within their local area.
Exactly. They're forced to make these tough choices about what to carry, and those choices are primarily driven by that need to reach a certain sales threshold within their local area.
So it's not even just about a product being good or a high quality. It's about whether it can guarantee enough local demand to justify taking up space on a shelf or, in a store.
Yeah, it's almost like a popularity contest in a way.
Yeah, it is.
Anderson calls this the economic threshold, and it forces traditional retailers to prioritize those products that are almost guaranteed to be popular enough in their specific location.
And that means that a lot of potentially great but less popular items just get left behind.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
That's kind of sad in a way. It's like a lot of great stuff is just hidden because it's not going to be like a guaranteed sale.
Right.
So how does this tyranny of locality actually play out in the real world? Does Anderson give any specific examples in the book?
He does. He talks about the Triplets of Belleville, which is this incredibly creative and unique animated film that was even nominated for an Oscar.
Wow.
Despite the critical acclaim, it only got a very limited release because it wasn't seen as a guaranteed blockbuster.
So even something as prestigious as an Oscar nomination wasn't enough to overcome this economic threshold.
Unfortunately not.
Wow.
And he offers another compelling example, Bollywood films in America. Bollywood produces hundreds of films every year, and there's a huge potential audience for them in the U.S., especially within the Indian diaspora.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Millions of people would probably love to see those films.
Right.
But I guess most of them just never make it to American theaters.
Exactly. And again, that's because they can't guarantee that concentrated local demand that would justify a wider release.
It really makes you wonder how many other amazing films, books, albums are out there that we never even get a chance to experience because of these limitations.
Yeah, definitely.
So how does the internet kind of break free from these limitations? What happens when we move from this world of scarcity to this world of abundance online?
That's where things get really interesting. Anderson uses Rhapsody, an online music service, to illustrate this shift. He contrasts their massive library of over 4 million tracks with a traditional retailer like Walmart, which at the time carried just 4,500 CD titles.
Wow, 4 million tracks. That's mind-blowing.
Yeah,
It really highlights just the sheer scale and possibility of online platforms.
it does. And this is where we're introduced to the central concept of the book, The Long Tail.
Okay.
Think of it as a mountain range. The peaks represent those mainstream hits, the bestsellers, the blockbusters.
Okay.
But stretching out beyond those peaks is this long, sprawling tail.
Okay, I can picture that. So what makes up that tail?
The tail is made up of all those niche products, those hidden gems that might not have mass appeal but have a dedicated audience somewhere out there.
So while the individual sales of a niche item in the tail might be small, are you saying that the sheer volume of those sales could actually add up to something significant?
Precisely. Anderson uses charts from Rhapsody's data to illustrate this point. He shows that even songs way down the list, those you'd probably never find in a traditional store, are still being downloaded.
That's pretty amazing. So even though each individual sale might be small, all those small sales in the tail could potentially rival the sales of those big hits at the top.
Exactly. And what's even more fascinating is that as companies like Amazon, Netflix, and Rhapsody expand their offerings, they've discovered that in many cases, demand actually follows supply.
Wait, so you're saying that by simply offering more choices, these online retailers are actually creating demand?
Yeah,
That seems to completely flip the traditional model on its head.
it does. And it challenges that traditional hit-driven mindset where profitability was all about mass appeal. In the long tail, hits and niches can coexist on a more level playing field because the cost of carrying a niche product online is practically nothing compared to a physical store.
So instead of just predicting the next big hit, these companies are making it possible for people to find what they truly love, even if it's something super specific or obscure.
Exactly.
That's a pretty powerful shift.
It is. And it leads to some pretty profound implications. What does this shift mean for the future of entertainment? Will we see more diversity and less reliance on mass appeal?
Those are some big questions. This is definitely a conversation worth diving deeper into. We were just talking about how online retailers are really changing the game by embracing this long tail and offering this incredible selection of all these niche products. It's not just about selling more stuff though, right?
Yeah.
What's the deeper significance of this whole shift?
I think what's truly transformative about the long tail is how it's changing the relationship between supply, demand, and choice.
Okay.
In the traditional model, supply really heavily influenced demand because of things like limited shelf space.
Right.
So retailers essentially decided what consumers could choose from.
Yeah, they were the gatekeepers.
Exactly. But the online world removes that constraint.
So instead of trying to predict what will be popular and only stocking those items, online retailers can offer a much wider array of choices. And then, like you were saying earlier, sometimes just offering more options can actually create the demand.
Yeah, that's a key insight. Anderson calls this the hidden majority, and he uses this really cool analogy to explain it. He compares it to an ocean where the islands poking above the surface represent the hits.
Okay.
But beneath the waterline, there's this vast, unseen mountain range of niche products just waiting to be discovered.
Wow, I love that analogy. It
Yeah.
really drives home the point that we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg when we only focus on those hits.
Exactly. And as the cost of connecting supply and demand goes down online, it's like the water level in that ocean is dropping, revealing more and more of that hidden mountain range.
So are you saying that the internet is making it easier for those niche products to find their audience? And that, in turn, encourages even more niche products to emerge.
Exactly. It creates this positive feedback loop.
I like that.
The more choices there are, the more likely people are to find something that truly resonates with them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's where the concept of the long tail starts to challenge our traditional ideas about markets.
How so?
Well, traditionally, we've focused on quantity, selling as many units of a popular product as possible.
Right, just trying to get those big numbers.
Yeah, but the long tail forces us to consider quality as well.
Okay.
By bringing those niche products within reach, online retailers unlock what Anderson calls latent demand, a demand that existed but couldn't be fulfilled before.
So it's not just about selling more. It's about fulfilling those unmet needs and desires that might have been completely overlooked in the past.
Yeah.
Does Anderson address any potential downsides to this shift?
He does. He acknowledges that the long tail presents some challenges.
Okay, like what?
For example, in a world of infinite choice, how do we even find what we're looking for?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like trying to find a specific grain of sand on a beach.
Exactly. It raises questions about the role of recommendation algorithms and how they shape our choices.
Yeah. Because are they helping us discover hidden gems? Or are they creating these filter bubbles where we're only exposed to things we already agree with?
That's a really important consideration.
Yeah, it's a bit concerning. I mean, the ability to connect with like-minded people online can be great, but if we're not careful, those algorithms could end up limiting our perspectives rather than expanding them.
Right.
Does Anderson offer any solutions or insights into how we can navigate this new landscape of choice more effectively?
He emphasizes the importance of being active and discerning consumers.
Okay.
We have to be willing to step outside our comfort zones and explore beyond those algorithmically curated recommendations.
So it's not just about passively consuming what's being offered. It's about actively seeking out and shaping the culture we want to see in the world.
Precisely. And I think that's one of the most empowering aspects of the long tail.
Yeah, I agree.
It gives consumers more agency than ever before. We're not just buying products, we're curating our own experiences.
It's almost like we're all becoming tastemakers, right? Our
Wow.
choices are actually shaping the cultural landscape in a very real way.
Exactly.
I'd love to hear more about that. So we've been talking about how the long tail really empowers consumers to curate their own experiences and become tastemakers in a way.
Yeah, it's definitely a significant shift from, the old days of just passively consuming whatever was put in front of us.
But let's bring it back to the long tail for a second. What does Anderson ultimately see as the lasting impact of this phenomenon? Is it just about, selling more stuff, or is there something deeper going on?
Well, Anderson argues that the true revolution of the long tail lies in its democratizing power.
Hmm.
It's not just about commerce, it's about access to culture and knowledge. It empowers both creators and consumers in ways that we've never seen before.
When you say it empowers creators and consumers, what do you mean by that?
Well, think about it. In the past, success in entertainment or retail was all about reaching the widest possible audience.
Right.
It was this winner-takes-all game where a handful of hits dominated the market.
Yeah.
But the long tail disrupts that whole dynamic.
So instead of a culture that's dominated by just a few massive hits, we now have the potential for a much more diverse and vibrant cultural landscape where niche interests can actually thrive and find their audience.
Exactly.
That's a pretty exciting prospect.
It is, and it has really profound implications for how we define success, too.
Well, how so?
Well, in the old model, success was all about mass appeal.
Right.
How many units did you sell? How many people saw your movie?
Right, right.
But in the long tail, success can actually mean connecting deeply with a smaller, more passionate group of people.
Yeah, it's like the difference between being a household name and being like a cult classic.
Exactly.
They both have their own unique value and impact. But this shift in how we define success also kind of raises some questions, doesn't it? Does the long tail have any potential downsides?
Yeah.
Could this focus on niche interests actually lead to a more fragmented culture where we have less and less in common with each other?
That's a really valid concern, and it's something that Anderson actually acknowledges in the book. He talks about the potential for filter bubbles and echo chambers, where people are only exposed to information that reinforces their existing beliefs.
Yeah, that's definitely something to be mindful of. The internet can be this incredible tool for connecting with like-minded people.
Yeah.
But if we're not careful, it can also limit our exposure to different perspectives and ideas.
Exactly. It's a double-edged sword. But I think the key takeaway here is that the long tail ultimately empowers us as consumers.
Okay.
It gives us more choices, more control, and more responsibility for actually shaping our own cultural experiences.
So it's not just about passively absorbing what's being offered. It's about actively seeking out, exploring, and supporting those creators and those products that truly resonate with us.
Absolutely.
It's about recognizing that our choices actually have power.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the long tail. Any final thoughts for our listeners out there?
Well, if you're listening to this, you're already someone who values knowledge and exploration. So my challenge to you is this. Now that you know about the long tail, how does it change the way you think about your own consumption habits?
Yeah, are you more likely to venture beyond those familiar hits and explore some of those less traveled paths in the tail?
Are you more conscious of the power of your choices and the impact they have on shaping the cultural landscape around us?
These are definitely questions worth pondering as we navigate this exciting new world of abundance and possibility.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep seeking kelp, keep discovering, and keep embracing that power of choice.